Hello and welcome to the second video on Harbor Online Community's YouTube channel. We are recapping each week's gathering, and right now we are in the middle of a cool summer series, VBS at Harbor, where we are taking a look at some old classic Bible stories that we may have learned as children, perhaps in a VBS setting, and we are doing it with fun crafts and snacks and just leaning into the whole VBS experience. This week, we looked at the story of baby Moses, and Dottie is the one who introduced the content and facilitated the discussion. So, Dottie, good to see you. Welcome to the YouTube channel. Um, can you tell us a little bit about what we looked at in this past gathering at Harbor?
Yeah, thanks, John. It's been so much fun doing VBS. And this last week, we looked at the story of baby Moses, and it was kind of fun to just call this story baby Moses. But as we dug into it, we looked at Exodus 1 and Exodus 2. While we kind of said it's about baby Moses, it was really about so much more happening. So in Exodus 1, Pharaoh commands that all the Hebrew boys are killed, and he orders the midwives to do it. And we really paid a lot of attention to the role of the midwives being these tricky, sneaky advocates on behalf of these boys and not killing them, and having a really clever scheme to do that, and how these midwives are resisting oppression and offering new ways of justice for this community. It's just absolutely remarkable. And then we looked at, okay, what happens when Moses is born with his family? Who's there? And we pointed out all of the women that are a part of it: his sister, his mom, Pharaoh's daughter. There's just so many women in this story. So while we said we were talking about baby Moses, we briefly talked about baby Moses, and we really talked about all of the women in the story that were stepping out of their place and against empire.
Wow. Yeah, it was a great conversation. I think for me, one of the things that I noticed as we were going through the story, I didn't even get a chance to observe this with my discussion group. There are two like males in the story. You have a baby Moses who is helpless, whose life is in jeopardy, and then you have Pharaoh, this tyrannical, bloodthirsty,
Yeah.
terrified, insecure leader. And then you have this host of women who are courageous, like you said, cunning, who are fighting together for justice. I mean, it's a really interesting, written within an extremely patriarchal culture. Kind of
Mhm.
fascinating. I'm wondering for you, this week preparing the content or last night when we talked about it, um, what stood out to you? Was there one amazing thing that rose to the surface that you've been thinking about?
Yeah, so the guiding theologian that was um helping me prepare for this was Kat Armas, who is a Cuban theologian, and she uses her perspective and really centers marginalized women of color in her theology. And she talks about the role of the midwives as such a crucial role that is often overlooked, but really sets the stage for revolution and justice. And yeah, Kat Armas, her author of Abuelita Faith, is just such a great person to be thinking about the different communities that can apply this type of story in their own life. And there's so much wisdom, courage, resiliency in the midwives, and that sets up oppressed women to also be resilient. Yeah, so Kat Armas, also Will Gaffney, those two theologians really shaped a new perspective of thinking about how pivotal midwives are, and how in our society today, in our Western society, we kind of disassociate from like the midwife language. Midwives are spiritual leaders, they're medical leaders, physically have a very active role. And I was really struck by how significant the role of a midwife was and is in a lot of Indigenous cultures, and how disassociated we are from it today in Western society.
Wow. We can drop in the video description below a link where people can go buy Abuelita Faith, the book by Kat Armis. So go check that out if you're interested, everyone. The other question I wanted to ask you, Dottie, is just what do you think this story, us reading it today, what do you think it invites us to consider? Is there a call to action? Is there something to ponder? Or whether just broadly, or maybe even in your own reading of it, is there something that you're taking from this story that you're going to continue to chew on or to consider, or that you think we should continue to ponder?
Yeah, I was asking myself that while I was reading the story of like, what's the takeaway? Obviously, there's these incredible women to celebrate that are pillars. And I do think that is a takeaway. At the very end of our gathering last night, we had one of the Harbor kiddos, Ella, share about an important woman in her life. And she shared about a woman from church. And she said that this woman really includes everyone. And it was so sweet to hear this kid talk about significant women in her life. And so that practice of honoring the courage, the strength, the tenderness, whatever it may be, of women around us, I think is just a beautiful practice. And the story, with its patriarchal limitations, really, really honors women in a lot of ways. Another thing that was brought up in my discussion room last night was someone mentioned, in response to the question, do you wish you had a midwife in your life, like so to say, advocating for you? Someone said, yeah, I'm thinking about a death doula, and how that is something that is like an interesting thought that's going through, and how our society, again, is pretty disconnected from death. And yeah, and we spent the rest of our discussion talking about death and kind of the spirituality around it, and wanting people with us in it, but also wanting to be with people at the end of their life. And so I think some of the remaining thoughts are what in our Western culture has become pretty disconnected to the bringing of life and the ending of life, and what are ways we can look to this ancient tradition of a midwife, or look to indigenous cultures to see these beautiful advocates, midwives that have rituals, ointment, medical advice, physically showing up. And sorry, it got noisy on my street.
No, Zoom is really good at blocking out background noises. I can barely hear anything there, so
Oh
don't
my
worry.
gosh, it's all I can hear. But yeah, just like, what does that look like in our Western society, whether it's actually having a midwife for parents going through labor, delivery, or just metaphorically, or a death doula. So yeah, I'm kind of pondering where we can incorporate some of that and decolonize our own practices.
That's awesome. One of the takeaways for me was to continue to think about rules, moral rules, and the way that like they are only there to help us have human flourishing. I know, I think you're an Enneagram 1, you've said many times. I certainly have some Enneagram 1 tendencies. And so for me, it's always hard to say, well, this rule sometimes can be broken. A rule like don't lie, right? Because here are these midwives courageously saving maybe hundreds and maybe thousands of lives, and lying in order to do it. And God's not in the story swooping in to smite these midwives. How dare you tell bear false witness, right? No, they're the heroes of this story, right? And it takes me back again to the one of my favorite moments in the gospel where Jesus is saying, Sabbath, it was made for humankind, not humankind for the Sabbath, right? Like, we have good rules, good guidelines, like it's better to tell the truth than to lie to people. But all of these rules like this are here so that we can live in peace with each other, work for justice together. And when the rules aren't allowing us to do that, it's time for the rules to be set aside. So that was
Yeah.
one of my takeaways. I don't know what that means for my life, but I'll have to keep pondering that.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a good word. And I think Kat Armas said, it's divinely sanctioned resistance, right? Something along those lines. Yeah.
yeah, good stuff. Well, thank you, Dottie, for being here. Good to chat with you about another gathering of Harbor Online Community.
Thanks, Jon. And thanks for suggesting talking about the midwives this week. This is your idea. So thanks for bringing it up.
You're welcome. You did a great job, and I'm glad we got to all talk about it.